The sound of my own cheek being slapped echoed through my dining room like a gunshot. For a moment, time stopped completely. My reading glasses flew off my face and clattered onto the hardwood floor I had polished just that morning. The sting spread across my left cheek like fire, but the pain in my heart was far worse. "Hand over those keys right now." Jessica screamed at me, her face twisted with a rage I had never seen before. "This house is too big for one selfish old woman." I stood there in shock, my hand slowly rising to touch my burning cheek. Around my own dining table sat my family. My son David, 45 years old, remained frozen in his chair like a statue. My granddaughter Emma, only 12, had started crying. My grandson Jake, 9, had scrambled behind the couch and was peeking out with frightened eyes. This was my home. The same dining room where I had served Sunday dinners for the past 30 years. The same table where my late husband Frank and I had shared morning coffee every day until cancer took him 5 years ago. The same house where I had raised David with love, patience, and values I thought would last a lifetime. "Jessica," I said quietly, my voice trembling, "please don't do this in front of the children." But she wasn't finished. My daughter-in-law, this 38-year-old woman who had married my son 3 years ago, towered over me with her hands on her hips. She was breathing heavily, her blonde hair disheveled, her expensive clothes wrinkled from her sudden outburst. "Don't you dare tell me what to do in what should be my house," she shouted. "Look at this place. You can barely clean it. The garden is a mess. You're a safety hazard to yourself and everyone around you." I looked around my dining room in confusion. The mahogany table gleamed under the warm light of the chandelier Frank had bought me for our 25th anniversary. The walls were spotless, decorated with family photos spanning decades. The hardwood floors reflected the evening light, filtering through the windows I had cleaned just yesterday. What mess was she talking about? "I clean every day," I said softly. "The house is fine." "I'm fine." Jessica laughed, but it was a cruel sound without any joy. "Fine? You call this fine? Margaret, you're 72 years old. You drive a car that's older than my marriage. You wear clothes from the thrift store. You can't even walk to the mailbox without getting tired." Each word was like a dagger. I had always been proud of my modest lifestyle. After Frank died, I chose to live simply. My 15-year-old Honda ran perfectly. My clothes were clean and comfortable. I walked to the mailbox every morning as part of my exercise routine. When had taking care of myself become evidence that I couldn't take care of myself? "Mom," David finally spoke, his voice weak and uncertain. "Maybe Jessica has a point. Maybe it would be better if we had keys. You know, just in case of an emergency." I turned to look at my son, the boy I had carried for 9 months, the child I had stayed up with through countless sick nights, the young man I had put through college by working double shifts as a head nurse. His brown eyes, so much like his father's, couldn't meet mine. "An emergency?" I repeated. "What kind of emergency requires you to come and go from my house whenever you want?" Jessica stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something sharp and angry. "The kind of emergency where we find you collapsed on the floor because you're too proud to admit you need help. The kind where you forget to turn off the stove and burn the house down. The kind where you fall down the stairs because you insist on living alone in a house with 3 floors." Her words were designed to plant seeds of doubt, to make me question my own abilities. But I knew the truth. I had never forgotten to turn off the stove. I had never collapsed. I used the main floor for everything and rarely went upstairs except to clean. My balance was perfect, my mind sharp, my health excellent, according to Dr. Rodriguez, just last month. "I've lived in this house for 30 years, I said, my voice growing stronger. I raised David here. I took care of Frank here during his illness. I know every corner, every step, every potential danger. This is my home. Was your home? Jessica corrected with a smile that made my blood run cold. Things change, Margaret. People get old. They become burdens. They need to make responsible decisions about their futures. That's when I understood. This wasn't about safety or emergencies or concern for well-being. This was about something else entirely. Something that had been building for months in small comments and suggestions I had chosen to ignore. You want my house, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Jessica's mask finally slipped completely. I want what's best for everyone. David and I have been struggling. We're behind on our mortgage. The kids need stability. This house has 4 bedrooms and sits on prime real estate. Meanwhile, you're rattling around here alone, wasting space that a real family could use. I am a real family, I whispered, feeling tears start to blur my vision. You're a widow living in the past, Jessica shot back. You're taking up resources that working families with children need. It's selfish, and frankly, it's pathetic. Emma's crying had gotten louder, and Jake was now completely hidden behind the couch. These children were witnessing their grandmother being attacked in her own home by their mother, while their father sat silent and complicit. David, I said, turning to my son one more time, are you going to let her talk to me this way? In my own home? In front of your children? David looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be. But then Jessica's hand landed on his shoulder, her fingernails digging into his shirt, and his expression went blank again. Mom, she's right about some things. The house is too big. You're getting older. Maybe it's time to think about downsizing to something more manageable. Something smaller. Something cheaper, he meant. Something that would free up the equity in my home for their use. I could see it all clearly now. The months of comments about my age, my abilities, my needs. The suggestions about retirement communities. The questions about my finances were disguised as concern about my future. Get out, I said quietly. What? Jessica asked, caught off guard by the change in my tone. I said, get out. All of you. Get out of my house right now. Jessica's face turned red with rage. You can't throw us out. We're family. We're trying to help you. Help me? I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. You just slapped me in my own dining room and told me I'm pathetic for living in the house I've called home for 3 decades. That's not helpful. That's abuse. Don't you dare call it abuse. Jessica screamed. We're the only family you have left. Without us, you have nobody. Nothing. Her words were meant to break me, to make me feel small and desperate and grateful for whatever scraps of attention they were willing to give me. But something inside me was shifting, hardening, preparing for a fight I hadn't known was coming. Give us the keys, Margaret, Jessica demanded, holding out her hand. We'll be back tomorrow with papers from a lawyer. You can't stop us from doing what's necessary to protect you from yourself. Papers from a lawyer? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Conservatorship papers, David said, finally finding his voice again. If you're declared unable to make rational decisions about your own care, the court can appoint us as your guardians. We can decide on the house for you. The room spun around me. Not only did they want to steal my home, they wanted to steal my freedom, my independence, my right to make decisions about my own life. They wanted to declare me incompetent and take control of everything I had worked for, everything Frank and I had built together. You've already spoken to a lawyer about this, I said, understanding flooding through me like ice water. Jessica smiled. We've been planning this conversation for months, Margaret. We hoped you would be reasonable. We hoped you would see that we're trying to help. But if you insist on being difficult, we have other options. I looked at my son, this man I had loved unconditionally for 45 years, and saw a stranger. David, is this really what you want? To have your mother declared incompetent and take away her home? I want what's best for everyone, he said, but his voice cracked on the words. You can't live here alone forever, Mom. Something's going to happen, and we won't be able to help you if we don't have access. Access to what? I asked. My house? My bank accounts? My life? Access to take care of you. Jessica exploded again. God, you're so paranoid. We're not trying to steal from you. We're trying to save you from yourself. But I could see the truth in her eyes. The greed, the calculation, the cold arithmetic that had turned my family into my enemies. They had looked at my house, my neighborhood, my potential value, and decided I was standing in the way of their solution to their financial problems. Get out, I repeated, my voice stronger now. Take the children and leave my house. Don't come back unless you're invited. Fine, Jessica said, grabbing her purse and keys. But we'll be back tomorrow with legal papers. And then you won't have a choice about letting us in. She stormed toward the door, then turned back one more time. Emma, Jake, come on. Say goodbye to Grandma. It might be a while before you see her again. The children approached me hesitantly. Emma threw her arms around my waist and whispered, I'm sorry Mommy yelled at you, Grandma. Jake hugged me too, his small voice shaking. Are you okay? Your cheek is really red. I'm fine, sweethearts, I told them, smoothing their hair and fighting back tears. Remember that I love you both very much, no matter what happens. David stood up slowly, his face pale. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something, to apologize, to take back everything that had just happened. But Jessica called his name sharply from the doorway, and he followed her out without another word. The front door slammed shut, leaving me alone in my dining room. The silence was deafening after all the shouting. I could hear my own heartbeat, my own breathing, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I bent down carefully and picked up my glasses, noting that one lens had a crack running through it. Just like everything else in my life, I thought. Something that had been whole and clear just minutes ago was now damaged, maybe beyond repair. I walked to the kitchen and filled a dishcloth with cold water, pressing it against my burning cheek. In the reflection of the kitchen window, I could see the red handprint Jessica had left on my face. Evidence of what my family had become. But as I stood there in my quiet kitchen, something began to settle in my mind. A clarity I hadn't felt in months of dealing with their subtle pressures and not so subtle demands. Jessica was right about one thing. Things were going to change, but not in the way she expected. I had spent 72 years learning how to take care of myself and the people I loved. I had worked as a head nurse for 40 years, making life and death decisions under pressure. I had managed my household, my finances, and my life with competence and wisdom. And I was far from the helpless old woman they wanted me to believe I was. Tomorrow they would come back with their lawyers and their papers and their threats. They would try to take away my home, my independence, and my dignity. They thought I was weak, confused, and alone. They were about to learn how wrong they were. After they left, I sat in my living room armchair for a long time, the cold cloth still pressed against my cheek. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times, but I barely heard it. My mind was racing, connecting dots I had been trying to ignore for months. This hadn't started tonight. The signs had been there for weeks, maybe longer. I just hadn't wanted to see them. 3 months ago, Jessica had started making comments about my old furniture. Margaret, Don't you think it's time for some new pieces? This stuff looks like it came from a museum. When I explained that the antique mahogany dining set had belonged to Frank's grandmother, she rolled her eyes. Well, that explains why it's so outdated. 2 months ago, she brought brochures for retirement communities. I found some lovely places, Margaret. They have meal plans and housekeeping services. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore. When I politely declined to look at them, she left them on my kitchen counter anyway. Last month, she brought a real estate agent to just take a look around. She claimed it was for insurance purposes, to make sure my coverage was adequate. But I caught the woman measuring rooms and taking photos. When I asked about it, Jessica got defensive. We're just trying to help you understand your options. And 2 weeks ago, David had asked me detailed questions about my finances. Mom, I want to make sure you're prepared for the future. Do you have enough savings? What about your investments? Maybe I should help you organize your paperwork. At the time, I thought he was being thoughtful. Now I understood he was gathering information. They had been planning this for months. The slap tonight wasn't a sudden outburst. It was the next step in a carefully orchestrated campaign to take control of my life and my assets. But what they didn't know, what no one knew except my lawyer and accountant, was that Margaret Chen wasn't the struggling widow they thought she was. I got up from my chair and walked to my home office, a small room off the kitchen that Frank had used for his hobby of restoring old radios. After he died, I converted it into my personal workspace. I kept my important papers here, along with my computer and the financial records no one else had ever seen. From the locked filing cabinet, I pulled out folders I hadn't opened in months. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, tax returns. The evidence of a life spent being careful, smart, and strategic about money. Frank and I had been married for 40 years when he died. I had worked as a head nurse at City General Hospital for my entire career, starting as a floor nurse right out of school and working my way up to head of the cardiac unit. Frank had been a union electrician with a genius for investing. Together, we had made decisions that seemed small at the time, but had grown into something substantial over the decades. When I retired 5 years ago at 67, my pension was solid. When Frank died, his life insurance and the sale of his electrical contracting business had added to our nest egg. But the real wealth had come from our investments. Frank had started buying rental properties in the 1980s when prices were low. He had invested in index funds before most people knew what they were. He had purchased stocks in companies he understood and held them for decades. I opened the current bank statement and stared at the numbers I rarely allowed myself to think about. The checking account showed $45,000. The savings account showed $380,000. But those were just my operating accounts, the money I used for daily expenses and emergencies. The investment account showed $2,847,000, nearly $3 million, carefully managed by Harrison Financial Services, the firm Frank and I had worked with for 20 years. Money that generated enough dividend income that I could live comfortably for the rest of my life without touching the principal. I owned my house outright, worth approximately $850,000, according to the last assessment. I also owned 3 rental properties that Frank and I had purchased over the years. A duplex near the university that rented for $1,800 per month total. A small apartment building downtown that generated $2,200 per month. And a single-family home in the suburbs that rented for $1,500 per month. My total monthly income from pensions, Social Security, dividends, and rental properties was $11,400. My monthly expenses were less than $4,000. I was adding $7,000 to my savings every month without even trying. So why did I live so modestly? Why did I drive a 15-year-old Honda and shop at discount stores and wear clothes until they fell apart? Because Frank had taught me something important about wealth. It changes how people see you, and not always in good ways. Money brings problems, Margaret, he used to say. It brings relatives out of the woodwork, scammers to your door, and friends who suddenly need loans they can't pay back. The smart rich stay invisible. After he died, I had made a conscious decision to maintain the lifestyle we had established. I kept the modest house, the practical car, and the simple clothes. To the outside world, including David, I appeared to be a widow living on a fixed income, getting by comfortably but without excess. It had been a protective strategy. And until tonight, it had worked perfectly. But now I have realized that my protection had become a liability. David and Jessica saw a vulnerable elderly woman with a valuable house and no apparent means to defend herself. They had looked at my modest lifestyle and assumed I was financially dependent, emotionally needy, and mentally declining. They had no idea they were targeting someone who could buy and sell their entire financial situation without blinking. I pulled out another folder, this one containing information I had been tracking without really wanting to face it. David's financial situation, which had become my concern 6 months ago when he started asking me for small loans. It had started innocently enough. "Mom, could you lend me $500? I had some unexpected car repairs." Then it was $800 for Emma's school expenses. Then $1,200 for Christmas presents. Each time he promised to pay me back quickly. Each time the repayment never came. But I had done some investigating of my own. David worked as a sales manager for an office supply company, making about $58,000 per year. Jessica worked part-time as a fitness instructor, making perhaps $15,000 annually. Together, their gross income was around $73,000. Their mortgage payment was $2,400 per month. Their car payments totaled $950. Add in insurance, utilities, food, and other expenses, and they were spending more than they made every month. They had been using credit cards to cover the difference, and according to the financial records I had quietly obtained, they owed more than $85,000 in credit card debt. 6 months ago, David had lost his biggest client. His commissions had dropped by 40%, creating a financial crisis they couldn't hide. That's when the small loans from me started. And that's when Jessica had begun her campaign to convince me I needed to downsize for my own good. But there was more. 3 months ago, I started noticing that my utility bills were lower than expected. When I investigated, I discovered that David had somehow arranged for my gas and electric companies to send my bills to his address. He had been paying them about $450 per month total without telling me. At first, I had been touched by his thoughtfulness. My son was trying to help his mother with her expenses, even when he was struggling financially. But now I understand the real reason. He was creating a paper trail of financial dependency. Evidence that I couldn't manage my own affairs and needed his assistance with basic responsibilities. It was part of the larger plan to take control of my life. I leaned back in Frank's old desk chair, tried to process the full scope of their deception. They had been systematically setting me up for months. Gathering information about my finances, documenting my supposed inability to care for myself, and building a legal case for conservatorship while presenting themselves as loving family members, concerned about my welfare. Jessica's outburst tonight hadn't been about concern for my safety. It had been frustrating that I wasn't cooperating with their timeline. They needed to move quickly before their own financial situation became completely untenable. The mortgage foreclosure Jessica had mentioned was probably closer than they had admitted. My house represented their solution to everything. If they could force me into a nursing home or senior housing, They could sell the house and use the equity to pay off their debts and start fresh. The fact that it would destroy my life and happiness was apparently a price they were willing to pay. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that because I lived modestly, I was financially vulnerable. They had confused simple living with poverty. They had mistaken kindness for weakness. Tomorrow, they would return with their lawyers and their papers and their threats. They would try to paint me as a confused old woman who couldn't take care of herself. They would present evidence of my deteriorating condition and their responsible efforts to help. They were about to discover that Margaret Chen had resources they couldn't imagine and a determination they had seriously underestimated. I pulled out my address book and found the number I needed. Patricia Wong had been my attorney for 15 years, handling Frank's estate and my personal legal affairs. She was also one of the smartest lawyers in the city, specializing in elder law and family disputes. If anyone could help me navigate what was coming, it was Patricia. But first, I needed to document everything that had happened tonight. I opened my computer and began typing, recording every word I could remember from Jessica's attack. The slap, the threats, the admission that they had already consulted lawyers about conservatorship, the children's tears, David's silence, the deliberate cruelty of their approach. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. My cheeks still throbbed, but my mind was crystal clear. I had a plan forming, a strategy that would protect me and expose them for what they really were. Jessica had said they would be back tomorrow with legal papers. She had threatened to have me declared incompetent and take control of my life. She'd slapped me in my own home and called me pathetic. Tomorrow, she was going to learn what pathetic really looked like, and it wasn't going to be me. I woke up at 6 a.m. with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The bruise on my cheek was darker now, purple and yellow, spreading across my skin like a map of last night's betrayal. But instead of feeling defeated, I felt energized. Today was the day I stopped being a victim and started fighting back. My first call was to Patricia Wong. Her secretary tried to tell me she was booked solid for the week, but when I explained the urgency of my situation, Patricia took the call immediately. "Margaret? Are you all right? Your voice sounds strange." "Patricia, I need to see you today. It's an emergency involving my family and potential legal action against me." I gave her the basic details of last night's confrontation, including Jessica's threats about conservatorship proceedings. "My God," Patricia said when I finished. "Margaret, can you be here at 9 a.m.? Clear your entire morning. We have a lot of work to do." My second call was to Mike Santos, a private investigator Patricia had recommended years ago when I needed background checks on potential tenants for my rental properties. Mike was a former police detective with a reputation for thoroughness and discretion. "Mrs. Chen, what can I do for you?" "Mike, I need a complete financial background check on my son and his wife. I need to know about their debts, their income, their assets, and anything else that might explain their recent behavior toward me. And I need it as quickly as possible." "How quickly is quickly?" "They're threatening legal action against me tomorrow. I need ammunition to defend myself. I'll get started immediately. Send me their full names, addresses, social security numbers if you have them, and employers. I'll have preliminary results by tonight." Patricia's office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel and polished marble. Her secretary led me to a conference room where Patricia was already waiting with legal pads, laptops, and a determined expression. Patricia Wong was a small woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes behind designer glasses, and a reputation for destroying opponents who underestimated her. She had handled Frank's estate with precision and had always treated me with respect and genuine care. "Margaret, let me see your face," she said immediately. The bruise was impossible to hide, even with makeup. "We need photos," Patricia said, pulling out her phone. "Document everything. The bruise, the swelling, all of it. This is evidence of assault." As she photographed my injuries, I told her the complete story. Not just last night's confrontation, but the months of pressure, manipulation, and financial investigation I had discovered. Patricia took notes rapidly, asking sharp questions that helped clarify the timeline and identify potential legal issues. "Margaret, do you have recordings of any of these conversations?" "No, but I documented everything last night while it was fresh in my memory. I have dates, times, and witnesses present." "Good. Now tell me about your actual financial situation. I need to understand what they're really after." I handed her the financial documents I had brought. Patricia's eyebrows rose as she reviewed the numbers. "Margaret, you're worth nearly $4 million. Why have you been living like you're on a tight budget?" "Because Frank taught me that visible wealth attracts problems. We chose to live modestly to protect our privacy and our security. It worked perfectly until my own family decided to target me." Patricia nodded approvingly. "Smart strategy. But now we need to use your resources to protect ourselves. I'm going to recommend we hire Mike Santos full-time for this case. We need to know everything about David and Jessica's situation, their plans, their legal counsel, everything." She pulled out her phone and called Mike directly. "Mike, it's Patricia Wong. I'm here with Margaret Chen, and we need full surveillance and investigation services starting immediately. Price is no object. We need to know what this couple is planning and who they're working with." While Patricia coordinated with Mike, I thought about the children. Emma and Jake had seen their mother assault their grandmother last night. They had watched their father stand by and do nothing. Whatever happened next, I wanted to protect them from as much ugliness as possible. "Patricia, what about my grandchildren? They witnessed the assault. Jessica used them as emotional weapons, threatening that I might not see them again. We can address that. If we can prove that Jessica is abusive and David is complicit, we might be able to seek supervised visitation rights. But first, we need to document everything and build our defense." Patricia's plan was comprehensive. First, we would gather evidence of David and Jessica's financial desperation and their systematic campaign against me. Second, we would have me evaluated by medical professionals to establish my mental and physical competence. Third, we would prepare a legal response to any conservatorship petition they might file. But Margaret, I want you to consider something else. Instead of just defending against their attack, we might want to go on the offense. What Jessica did last night could be prosecuted as elder abuse. The threats, the assault, the financial manipulation, all of it adds up to a pattern of behavior that law enforcement takes very seriously. The thought of pressing criminal charges against my own son's wife made my stomach clench. But then I remembered the feeling of her hand across my face, the cruelty in her voice, the fear in my grandchildren's eyes. What would that involve? We filed a police report about the assault. We document the financial threats and manipulation. We let the district attorney decide whether to press charges. At minimum, it creates an official record of their behavior and puts them on notice that you're not going to be a passive victim. By lunchtime, Patricia had arranged for me to see Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a geriatrician who specialized in competency evaluations. Dr. Rodriguez had been my physician for 3 years, so she had baseline information about my health and mental state. The evaluation was thorough. Cognitive tests, memory assessments, physical examinations, and psychological screening. Dr. Rodriguez was meticulous, knowing that her findings might be challenged in court. "Margaret, I need to ask you directly. Have you noticed any changes in your memory, your judgment, Your ability to manage your daily affairs? None whatsoever. I balance my checkbook every month, manage 3 rental properties, maintain my house, drive safely, cook for myself, and handle all my personal business without assistance. Until last night, I thought I was managing my family relationships well too. Dr. Rodriguez smiled. Your cognitive function is excellent. Your physical health is better than most people 20 years younger. If anyone tries to claim you're incompetent to manage your own affairs, they're going to have to explain why a licensed physician found you to be in perfect mental and physical health. By 4 p.m., Mike Santos called with his preliminary findings. What he had discovered in just 6 hours was worse than I had imagined. Mrs. Chen, your son and daughter-in-law are in serious financial trouble. They're 3 months behind on their mortgage and facing foreclosure proceedings. They owe $127,000 in credit card debt across 8 different cards. David's car is about to be repossessed, and they've received eviction notices for non-payment of utilities. But there's more. Jessica has been meeting with a lawyer named Thomas Brennan. He's not actually an elder law specialist. He's a general practice attorney who advertises that he can handle family financial disputes. I found records showing she's paid him $2,500 so far, money she borrowed against her credit cards. What kind of services is he providing? According to my sources, he's been researching conservatorship laws and helping Jessica document what she calls your declining capacity. They have a file of supposed incidents where you've shown poor judgment or inability to care for yourself. My blood ran cold. What kind of incidents? Things like forgetting appointments, leaving doors unlocked, confusion about dates and times, and difficulty managing your finances. It's all fabricated, but it's detailed enough to present to a judge if they can find one who doesn't look too closely at the evidence. Mike, Patricia interjected, do we know when they plan to file? Tomorrow morning, according to the information I gathered. They have an appointment with Judge Harrison in family court at 10 a.m. They're hoping to get an emergency conservatorship order based on immediate danger to Mrs. Chen's welfare. Patricia was furious. An emergency order? Based on what emergency? Based on the claim that Mrs. Chen is showing signs of dementia and may harm herself or others if she continues to live alone. They have sworn statements from David saying his mother has become increasingly confused and agitated. The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. Not only were they trying to steal my house and my independence, they were willing to lie under oath to do it. David, the son I had loved unconditionally for 45 years, was going to stand in front of a judge and claim I was mentally incompetent. Patricia, what do? We beat them to court. I'm filing an emergency petition tonight asking Judge Harrison to deny any conservatorship request and to issue a restraining order protecting you from further harassment and abuse. We're also filing a police report about last night's assault. And Mike, I want 24-hour surveillance on David and Jessica starting immediately. I want to know who they talk to, where they go, and what they're planning. If they're going to wage war against Margaret, they're going to discover she has better resources and smarter allies than they imagined. As we left Patricia's office that evening, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my situation. David and Jessica thought they were dealing with a confused, frightened old woman who would crumble under pressure. Tomorrow, they were going to learn that they had picked a fight with someone who had spent 40 years making life and death decisions under pressure, who had resources they couldn't imagine, and who had allies they didn't know existed. The little old lady they thought they could intimidate was about to show them what real power looked like. At exactly 9:30 a.m., I watched from my living room window as David's car pulled into my driveway. My heart started beating faster, but it wasn't from fear. It was from anticipation. Patricia's plan was in motion, Mike's surveillance team was in position, and I was ready for whatever they were about to try. Jessica got out first, wearing a navy business suit and carrying a leather briefcase like she was attending a corporate meeting. David emerged from the passenger side looking uncomfortable in a tie that was clearly borrowed. But it was the third person who caught my attention, a heavy-set man in an ill-fitting gray suit carrying an official-looking folder. I activated the recording device Patricia had given me, hidden in the lamp on the table next to my chair. Every word spoken in my living room would be captured with crystal clarity. The doorbell rang, and I took a deep breath before opening it. Jessica immediately pushed past me into the house, with David and the stranger following behind her. "Margaret, we need to talk," Jessica announced, setting her briefcase on my coffee table like she owned the place. "This is Thomas Brennan, our attorney. We're here to discuss your situation." Mr. Brennan stepped forward and handed me a business card. "Mrs. Chen, I represent your son and his wife in matters relating to your welfare and care needs. We're here because your family is concerned about your ability to live independently." I looked at the card. Thomas Brennan, general practice attorney. The address was in a strip mall across town. This was the man who was supposed to help them steal my life. "I wasn't aware I had a situation that required an attorney," I said calmly. "Please sit down." "Can I offer you coffee?" Jessica waved dismissively. "We don't have time for social pleasantries, Margaret. We're here on serious business." But I insisted on playing the gracious hostess, bustling around the kitchen to prepare coffee and cookies. I wanted them to feel relaxed, confident, and ready to reveal their true intentions. Patricia had coached me on this: let them talk, let them hang themselves with their own words. As I served the refreshments, Mr. Brennan opened his folder and spread documents across my coffee table. "Mrs. Chen, your family has brought some concerning observations to my attention. They're worried about your mental state and your ability to make sound decisions about your living situation." "What kind of observations?" I asked, settling into my armchair with my own cup of coffee. Jessica immediately took control. "Margaret, don't pretend you don't know what we're talking about. Your behavior has become increasingly erratic over the past few months." She pulled out a legal pad and began reading from it like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "2 weeks ago, you forgot about our dinner plans and weren't home when we arrived. Last month, I found your front door unlocked when I came to check on you. 3 weeks ago, you seemed confused about what day it was when David called." I listened to her fabricated lists with growing amazement. Each incident was either completely false or a twisted version of reality. The dinner plans she mentioned, I had called David that morning to cancel because I had a doctor's appointment. The unlocked door, I had been in the garden and had left it open while carrying in groceries. The confusion about days, I had simply asked David to repeat which day he wanted to visit because the phone connection was bad. "And then there's your financial behavior," Jessica continued, warming to her theme. "David told me you've been asking him to help with your bills. You can't seem to manage your checkbook anymore. You've been making irrational money decisions." "What irrational decisions?" I asked calmly. Mr. Brennan consulted his notes. "Your son indicated you've been giving away money inappropriately and struggling to pay your basic expenses." This was rich, considering David owed me over $3,000 in loans he had never repaid, and I had been secretly paying his utilities for months. But I let them continue building their case of lies. "The house is another concern," Jessica said, gesturing around my immaculate living room. "You can't keep up with the maintenance. The yard work is too much for you. You're becoming a danger to yourself and others." I looked around my living room, which I had cleaned from top to bottom yesterday. The hardwood floors gleamed, the windows sparkled, and fresh flowers from my garden sat in a vase on the mantel. If this was evidence of my inability to care for myself, I wondered what Jessica's house looked like. "Mr. Brennan," I said, "I'm curious about something. What exactly are you proposing?" He cleared his throat and pulled out another document. "Mrs. Chen, we're recommending that the court appoint your son as your conservator, with authority to make decisions about your living arrangements, your finances, and your medical care. This would be in your best interests, given your declining capacity." "And what would happen to my house?" Jessica couldn't hide her eagerness. "Well, obviously, you can't continue living here alone. We've researched some lovely assisted living facilities that would be much more appropriate for someone in your condition. The house would need to be sold to pay for your care." There it was the naked greed behind all their concern for my welfare. They wanted to put me in an institution and sell my house to solve their financial problems. "I see," I said quietly. "And you've already chosen which facility you think would be best for me?" "We've done extensive research," David said, speaking for the first time since entering my house. "There are several places that specialize in caring for people with your needs." My needs. As if being 72 years old was automatically a disability requiring institutional care. Mr. Brennan leaned forward. "Mrs. Chen, I want you to understand that this process can be voluntary or involuntary. If you cooperate and sign these papers acknowledging that you need assistance with your affairs, everything can be handled smoothly and privately. If you refuse, we'll be forced to petition the court for an emergency conservatorship." "What would that involve?" "A judge would evaluate the evidence of your declining capacity and could order you to surrender control of your finances and property immediately. It would become a matter of public record, and you might be required to undergo a psychological evaluation." The threat was clear. Submit voluntarily or be dragged into court and publicly humiliated. They had planned this carefully, building their case over months and presenting me with an ultimatum designed to make resistance seem futile. "I'd like to see these papers you want me to sign," I said. Jessica practically threw the documents at me. "Here. It's all very straightforward. You acknowledge that you need help managing your affairs, and you appoint David as your conservator with full authority to act on your behalf." I read through the papers slowly, noting how comprehensive they were. If I signed these documents, David would have the legal right to sell my house, access my bank accounts, make medical decisions for me, and essentially control every aspect of my life. I would become a legal non-person, dependent entirely on his goodwill and judgment. "This is quite thorough," I observed. "You've put a lot of thought into this." "We've been planning this for your own good," Jessica said impatiently. "We can't stand by and watch you deteriorate any further. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to the children to have them worry about their grandmother's safety." "The children seemed quite upset last night," I said quietly, "especially when you slapped me." The room went completely silent. Mr. Brennan looked startled, obviously hearing about the assault for the first time. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Jessica's face flushed red. "That was an unfortunate incident," she said finally. "You were being unreasonable and aggressive. I was trying to get your attention." "By hitting me?" "You were having an episode, Margaret. You weren't listening to reason. Sometimes you have to be firm with people who are confused and agitated." Mr. Brennan cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on the legal matters at hand." But I wasn't finished. "Mr. Brennan, are you aware that your clients entered my home last night, demanded my house keys, and when I refused, Jessica physically assaulted me in front of my grandchildren?" His face went pale. No, I wasn't informed of any incident." "Oh, yes," I continued, touching my still bruised cheek. She slapped me right here in this living room and told me I was a pathetic old woman who didn't deserve to live in my own house. Jessica jumped to her feet. That's not how it happened. You're twisting everything. This is exactly what we're talking about. You can't even remember events correctly anymore. I remember perfectly, I said calmly. Would you like me to describe exactly what you said to me and my grandchildren? Margaret, you're obviously having memory issues, David said desperately. That's not how things happened at all. At that moment, my doorbell rang. I smiled and stood up. Excuse me, I believe I have visitors. I opened the door to find Patricia Wong and a uniformed police officer standing on my porch. Mrs. Chen, Patricia said loud enough for everyone in the living room to hear. Officer Martinez is here to follow up on the assault report you filed. I hope you don't mind that we're a few minutes early. The reaction in my living room was immediate and dramatic. Jessica gasped and grabbed David's arm. Mr. Brennan started shuffling papers frantically. David turned white as a sheet. Of course, I said graciously. Please come in. We have some visitors I'd like you to meet. Patricia entered with the confidence of a woman who had practiced law for 25 years and won most of her battles. Officer Martinez was a serious-looking man in his 40s who immediately focused on the bruise on my cheek. Ma'am, are you Margaret Chen? I am. I'm here about the assault complaint you filed yesterday. Can you identify the person who struck you? I looked directly at Jessica, who was now standing behind my couch as if it could protect her. That would be Jessica Murphy, my son's wife. Officer Martinez turned to Jessica. Ma'am, I need to inform you that you're being charged with assault against an elderly person. You have the right to remain silent. Wait, Jessica screamed. This is insane. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Tell them, David. But David was staring at Patricia with recognition and growing horror. You're Patricia Wong, Mom's lawyer. I am indeed, Patricia said with a cold smile. And you must be David Chen, the son who's been planning to have his mentally incompetent mother declared incompetent so he can steal her house. Mr. Brennan stood up abruptly. I think there's been some misunderstanding here. We're simply trying to help Mrs. Chen with her care needs. Patricia laughed. Mr. Brennan, I've reviewed your background. You're a general practice lawyer who handles traffic tickets and small claims disputes. You have no experience in elder law or conservatorship proceedings. What exactly did Mrs. Murphy pay you to come here and intimidate my client? The room was spinning out of control for Jessica and David. Their carefully planned ambush was turning into a disaster. Officer Martinez was reading Jessica her rights while she protested her innocence. Mr. Brennan was packing up his papers and clearly planning to leave as quickly as possible. Patricia, I said calmly, would you like to see the documents they wanted me to sign? Patricia reviewed the conservatorship papers with professional interest. Fascinating. Mr. Brennan, these documents are completely inappropriate. They would grant Mr. Chen authority far beyond what any court would approve, especially without proper medical evaluation or evidence of incapacity. But there is evidence, David said desperately. Mom's been having problems. Memory issues, confusion, inability to manage her affairs. Really? Patricia asked. What kind of problems? As David began repeating Jessica's fabricated list of incidents, Patricia took notes and asked detailed questions that exposed the lies and inconsistencies in their story. When he mentioned my supposed financial difficulties, she smiled. Mr. Chen, are you aware of your mother's actual financial situation? She's living on Social Security and a small pension. She's been struggling to pay her bills. Patricia pulled out a folder from her briefcase. According to these financial records, Your mother has liquid assets of over $3 million, owns 4 properties, including this house, and has a monthly income that exceeds most working families. She's been paying your utilities for 6 months because she was concerned about your financial struggles. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's mouth fell open. David stared at Patricia as if she were speaking a foreign language. Mr. Brennan edged toward the door. Furthermore, Patricia continued, Mrs. Chen underwent a comprehensive medical evaluation yesterday. Dr. Rodriguez found her to be in excellent physical and mental health, with cognitive function superior to the average person her age. Jessica found her voice. That's impossible. She's been acting strange for months. Strange how? Patricia asked. She refuses to let us help her. She won't listen to our suggestions about moving to a safer environment. She's stubborn and unreasonable. So your evidence that she's mentally incompetent is that she disagrees with your suggestions and refuses to do what you want her to do? When Patricia put it that way, the weakness of their case became obvious even to them. Officer Martinez finished with Jessica's arrest procedure and turned to me. Mrs. Chen, do you want to press charges? I looked at my son, who was staring at the floor with shame and confusion written across his face. I looked at Jessica, who was handcuffed and crying. I thought about my grandchildren, who would have to live with the consequences of whatever I decided next. Officer Martinez, I want Jessica charged with assault, but I also want something else. I want a restraining order that keeps both of them away from my property and prohibits any further harassment or intimidation. Patricia nodded approvingly. I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. Mr. Brennan seized his opportunity to escape. I'm withdrawing from this case immediately. There's obviously been some misunderstanding about the facts. As he hurried toward the door, Patricia called after him. Mr. Brennan, you might want to review the legal requirements for conservatorship proceedings before you take another case like this. What you attempted here could result in sanctions against your license. The door slammed behind him, leaving Jessica, David, Patricia, Officer Martinez, and me in my living room. The morning that had started with their planned ambush was ending with Jessica in handcuffs and their entire scheme exposed. David, I said quietly, do you have anything to say to me? He looked up with tears in his eyes. Mom, we thought. Jessica said you needed help. I needed help, I agreed. I needed help from my family. I needed love and respect and honesty. Instead, I got lies and manipulation and a plan to steal everything I've worked for my entire life. We weren't trying to steal anything, he said weakly. Then what were you trying to do? He couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. They had been trying to solve their financial problems by sacrificing my independence, my dignity, and my right to control my own life. Officer Martinez escorted Jessica toward the door. As they passed me, she hissed, This isn't over, Margaret. You can't hide behind your lawyer forever. Family is family, and we won't give up. Even in handcuffs, even facing criminal charges, Jessica was still threatening me. Still convinced that she had some right to my life and property that I was unfairly denying her. After they left, Patricia and I sat in my living room amid the scattered papers and abandoned coffee cups. The house felt strangely peaceful after all the drama and hostility. Margaret, you handled that perfectly, Patricia said. They walked into every trap we set. The recording device captured everything, including their admission that they fabricated evidence against you. What happens now? Now we wait and see if they're smart enough to stay away from you. Jessica will face criminal charges for assault. The restraining order will be in place by tomorrow. And David will have to decide whether he wants to repair his relationship with his mother or continue supporting his wife's criminal behavior. I looked around my living room, my sanctuary that they had tried to take away from me. The afternoon light was streaming through the windows I had cleaned myself, illuminating the furniture I had chosen and maintained, highlighting the photos of the family I had loved unconditionally, until they decided to betray me. Patricia, what are the chances they'll try again? With Jessica facing criminal charges and you having legal representation? Very small. But Margaret, I want you to consider something. You've been living modestly to protect your privacy and avoid problems. But sometimes the best protection is making sure people know exactly what they're dealing with. She was right. My strategy of invisible wealth had backfired spectacularly. The people who should have protected me had seen my modest lifestyle as evidence of vulnerability instead of wisdom. It was time to stop hiding who I really was. 2 weeks after Jessica's arrest, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going public with my story. The local newspaper had gotten wind of the case through court records. A reporter named Sarah Kim called me, wanting to know more about the elderly woman who outsmarted her family's attempt to steal her fortune. At first, I declined to comment. But after talking to Patricia and thinking about all the other seniors who might be facing similar situations without my resources, I agreed to an interview. Sarah came to my house on a Thursday morning. She was a young woman in her 30s with intelligent eyes and a gentle manner that put me at ease immediately. I told her everything: the months of manipulation, the assault, the fake conservatorship attempt, and my decision to fight back. Mrs. Chen, why did you choose to live so modestly when you had such substantial wealth? Because my husband taught me that money changes how people see you, and not always in good ways. We chose simple living to protect our family and our privacy. Ironically, that decision nearly cost me everything when my own family decided to target me. The article ran on the front page of the Sunday edition with the headline, "The Millionaire Next Door: How One Woman's Wisdom Saved Her from Family Fraud." The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone rang constantly for days. Other seniors called to share their own stories of family manipulation and financial abuse. Adult children called to apologize for behavior they recognized in themselves. Legal professionals called to commend Patricia's handling of the case. Social workers called asking for advice on protecting vulnerable elderly clients. But the most important call came on Wednesday evening. It was David. "Mom, can we talk? Please." His voice sounded different, smaller, ashamed. I hadn't heard from him since the morning of Jessica's arrest 2 weeks earlier. "What do you want to say, David?" "I want to say I'm sorry. I want to say I was wrong. I want to ask if there's any way you can forgive me." I was quiet for a long moment, feeling the weight of 45 years of love and recent months of betrayal. "Where is Jessica?" "She moved out. She's staying with her parents while she waits for her court date. She filed for divorce yesterday." That surprised me. I had expected her to double down on her position, to continue fighting for what she saw as her right to my assets. "She said the whole thing is your fault," David continued. "She said you tricked us by pretending to be poor, and now she's facing criminal charges because of your lies." Even after everything that had happened, Jessica still saw herself as the victim. Still believed that my choice to live modestly was somehow a form of deception that justified her behavior. "David, what do you think?" "I think I was an idiot. I think I let a woman I thought I loved convince me to betray the person who loved me most. I think I almost destroyed the most important relationship in my life for money I never had a right to expect." His words sounded genuine, but I had learned to be cautious about trusting family members who claimed to have my best interests at heart. What about the children? How are Emma and Jake handling all of this? They're confused and hurt. Emma keeps asking why Mommy hit Grandma. Jake has been having nightmares. They want to see you, but Jessica said you don't want to see them anymore because of what happened. The idea that my grandchildren thought I didn't want to see them broke my heart. They were innocent victims in this whole situation, caught between adults who had lost sight of what really mattered. David, I want to see the children, but I need to know that you understand what happened and why it can't happen again. Mom, can I come over? Can we talk face to face? I have things I need to say to you that I can't say over the phone. Against Patricia's advice, I agreed to meet with David, but I insisted on conditions. Patricia would be present. The conversation would be recorded. And if David showed any sign of continuing his previous behavior, the meeting would end immediately. David arrived the next evening looking like he had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was unkempt, and his eyes were red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep or both. He sat across from me in the same living room where Jessica had slapped me, where she had tried to force me to sign away my independence, where their entire scheme had collapsed. Mom, I need you to know that I've spent the last 2 weeks thinking about what happened. Really thinking about it, not just making excuses or trying to blame someone else. Patricia sat quietly in the corner, taking notes and monitoring the conversation. The recording device was running, capturing every word for posterity and legal protection. Go on, I said. I realized that everything Jessica said about caring for you was a lie. We weren't concerned about your welfare. We were panicking about our own financial situation and looking for someone to solve our problems. He pulled out a piece of paper covered with his handwriting. I made a list of every lie we told, every manipulation we used, every cruel thing we said or did. I wanted to face all of it, not just the parts that were easy to admit. David began reading from his list. The forgotten dinner plans that were actually canceled plans. The unlocked door that was actually an open door while I was gardening. The financial struggles that were actually their financial struggles were projected onto me. The confusion and memory problems were completely fabricated. But the worst thing, he said, his voice breaking, was that I stood there and watched Jessica slap you. My own mother. And I didn't say anything. I didn't protect you. I didn't defend you. I just stood there like a coward and let her abuse you in your own home. Tears were streaming down his face now, and I felt my own eyes filling up despite my determination to stay strong. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I broke something between us that might never be fixed, but I need you to know that I understand what I did was wrong. Not just legally wrong or morally wrong, but wrong in a way that goes against everything you taught me about family and loyalty and treating people with respect. Why, David? I asked quietly. Why did you let it get that far? Why didn't you question what Jessica was telling you? He was quiet for a long time, thinking about how to answer honestly. Because it was easier than facing the truth about our situation. We owed so much money, Mom. We were about to lose everything. When Jessica started talking about how you didn't need such a big house, about how you could be happier in a smaller place, it sounded like a solution that could help everyone. But deep down, you knew it wasn't really about helping me. Deep down, I knew we were being selfish. But I convinced myself that we were doing the right thing because Jessica was so sure, so confident that she knew what was best for you. And because I was scared of losing everything we had worked for, what you had worked for, or what you had borrowed for. David flinched at the accuracy of my question. What we had borrowed for. You're right. We hadn't worked for any of it. We had just been spending money we didn't have, and hoping something would save us from the consequences. Patricia leaned forward. David, did you know your mother had been paying your utilities? I suspected something. The bills were lower than they should have been, and when I called to ask about payment plans, they said the account was current. But I didn't want to ask questions because I was afraid of the answers. So you knew I was helping you financially, but you still supported Jessica's plan to take my house? I know how that sounds, Mom. I know it makes me look like the worst kind of person. But Jessica convinced me that you were giving us money because you couldn't manage your own affairs properly. She said you were confused about your finances, and we were actually helping you by organizing your life. The depth of Jessica's manipulation was staggering. She had taken every act of kindness and generosity on my part and twisted it into evidence of my incompetence. My financial help became proof that I couldn't manage money. My modest lifestyle became evidence of poverty. My independence became stubbornness that needed to be overcome. David, do you understand now why I chose to live the way I do? I'm starting to. You and Dad were smart about money, but you were also smart about people. You knew that if people saw your real wealth, they would treat you differently. And you proved that theory correct. We did. We saw what we thought was vulnerability and opportunity instead of wisdom and choice. Patricia spoke for the first time since David arrived. David, what are your intentions now? What do you want from your mother? I want to earn back her trust, if that's possible. I want to show Emma and Jake that their father made terrible mistakes but learned from them. I want to be the son my mother deserves, not the son who tried to steal her life savings. And how do you propose to do that? David reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. I wrote this up myself. It's a statement acknowledging everything I did wrong, apologizing for my behavior, and promising that I will never again make demands on Mom's finances or property. I want her to have it in writing. He handed me the document, which was written in his careful handwriting and signed at the bottom. It was a complete confession and apology, admitting to the conspiracy against me and renouncing any future claims on my estate. David, this is very comprehensive, I said after reading it. But words are easy to write. How do I know you mean them? Because I'm going to prove it through my actions. I'm getting financial counseling to learn how to manage money responsibly. I'm looking for a second job to pay off our debts without borrowing from anyone. I'm going to therapy to understand how I let Jessica manipulate me into betraying you. And what about the children? I want them to have a relationship with their grandmother, but only if you want that too. I want them to learn from this situation that family members should protect and respect each other, not exploit each other. I looked at this man who was my son, who had betrayed me so completely, but who seemed genuinely committed to making amends. The protective part of me wanted to maintain my distance, to make him prove his sincerity over the years before trusting him again. But the mother in me wanted to heal the relationship and rebuild what we had lost. David, I'm willing to give you a chance to earn back my trust, but there will be conditions. Anything. First, you and the children can visit me, but only with advance notice and only at times that work for both of us. No more showing up unannounced or trying to pressure me about anything. Agreed. Second, we never discuss my finances again unless I bring up the subject. No questions about my investments, my property, my will, or my plans for the future. Agreed. Third, if Jessica ever contacts me again or tries to involve the children in any schemes against me, you will protect me and them by cutting off all contact with her immediately. Mom, I'm already planning to request full custody. After what happened here, I don't think she's fit to be around the children unsupervised. Patricia nodded approvingly. Those sound like reasonable conditions. David, I want you to understand that your mother is being more generous than she has to be. The law would support her completely if she chose to cut off contact with you permanently. I know, and I'm grateful for the chance to make things right. As David prepared to leave, he turned back to me one more time. Mom, I have one more thing to say. I know you've been taking care of our family financially for months, maybe years, without any of us knowing. I know you've been the safety net that kept us from losing everything, and we repaid your generosity by trying to steal from you. He pulled out his wallet and took out a folded piece of paper. This is a check for $4,200. It's every penny I can come up with right now toward paying you back for the utilities and the loans, and everything else you've given us. It's not enough, but it's a start. I looked at the check, clearly written on an account that probably didn't have much money left in it. This wasn't a gesture designed to impress me or manipulate me. It was a genuine attempt to take responsibility for his debts. David, keep the money for now. Use it to get your life stable. When you're in a position to pay me back without causing hardship for yourself and the children, we can discuss it. Are you sure? I'm sure. But I want you to remember this feeling, the feeling of wanting to pay your own debts and take responsibility for your own mistakes. Hold on to that feeling because it's the beginning of real integrity. After David left, Patricia and I reviewed the evening's conversation. What do you think? She asked. I think he's genuinely sorry. I think he understands what he did wrong. But I also think it's going to take time to know whether this change is permanent or just temporary remorse. That's wise. And what about Jessica? What about her? She's still facing criminal assault charges. She could try to plea bargain by claiming you somehow provoked the attack. Let her try. We have everything documented and we have witnesses. More importantly, we have the truth on our side. Patricia smiled. Margaret, you've handled this entire situation with more grace and wisdom than most people could manage. You protected yourself without destroying your family. You stood up for your rights without becoming vindictive. You've set an example for other seniors who might face similar situations. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. The family I thought I had lost forever was beginning to heal. The son who had betrayed me was working to earn back my trust. The grandchildren I had missed desperately would be visiting this weekend. But more importantly, I had learned something valuable about myself. I had discovered that I was stronger, smarter, and more capable than even I had realized. I had faced down people who wanted to steal my independence and won. I had protected my dignity while maintaining my compassion. I had shown that being elderly doesn't mean being helpless. The woman who had been slapped and threatened in her own dining room was gone. In her place was someone who understood her own worth and wouldn't accept being treated as anything less than the formidable person she had always been. 6 months after that terrible Sunday dinner, I sat in my living room reading thank you letters from people who had seen my story in the newspaper and found the courage to stand up to their own manipulative family members. Dear Mrs. Chen, one letter began, I'm 78 years old and my daughter has been pressuring me to sell my house and move into senior housing so she can use the money to pay for her son's college. After reading your story, I hired a lawyer and said no. Thank you for showing me that I have the right to control my own life. Another letter came from a man in his 80s. My son had been helping me with my finances by taking money from my accounts without asking. I thought I was being ungrateful by questioning him. Your story taught me the difference between loving help and financial abuse. I've taken back control of my money, and my son is getting counseling to understand why what he did was wrong. The letters kept coming, dozens of them, from seniors who had been inspired to protect themselves, and from adult children who had recognized their own harmful behavior and committed to changing it. Patricia had been right when she suggested that going public would help other people. My story had become a cautionary tale about elder abuse and a success story about fighting back. I had been interviewed by 3 more newspapers, 2 radio stations, and a local television news program. Each time, the message was the same: seniors have rights, family doesn't automatically deserve access to your assets, and it's never too late to stand up for yourself. But the most important changes had happened within my own family. David had kept every promise he made that night in my living room. He visited twice a week with Emma and Jake, always calling ahead and always respecting my schedule. He found a second job working evenings at a retail store and was slowly paying down the debt that had driven him to desperate measures. He attended weekly counseling sessions to understand how he had allowed Jessica to manipulate him into betraying me. Most importantly, he had never again mentioned my finances or my property or my plans for the future. He treated me like a competent adult whose decisions were her own to make. The son who had tried to have me declared incompetent was learning to respect my independence completely. Emma and Jake were thriving. The divorce proceedings had been difficult, but David had been awarded primary custody after Jessica's assault conviction. She had visitation rights, but only supervised visits, and the children seemed relieved to be living in a calmer environment. Emma, now 13, had asked me directly about what happened that night. I told her an age-appropriate version of the truth, that sometimes adults make bad choices when they're worried about money, that it's never okay to hit someone or try to take things that don't belong to you, and that families can heal from difficult situations if everyone is willing to work on it. Jake, now 10, was more interested in the fact that his grandmother was secretly rich and wanted to know if that meant he could have a pony. I explained that having money doesn't mean spending it on everything you want, and that the most important things in life, love, respect, honesty, kindness, can't be bought with any amount of money. Jessica had learned that lesson the hard way. Her assault conviction resulted in a $2,000 fine, 100 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record. The divorce settlement left her with very little, since most of their assets had been purchased with borrowed money. She had moved back in with her parents and was working at a gym while trying to rebuild her life. Through David, I heard that she still blamed me for her situation. She told anyone who would listen that I had tricked her by living modestly while being wealthy, that I had overreacted to a minor family disagreement, and that I had destroyed her marriage by being selfish about my money. Even now, Jessica couldn't understand that the problem wasn't my wealth or my lifestyle choices. The problem was her belief that she had a right to control my life and take my property. The problem was her willingness to use violence and manipulation to get what she wanted. The problem was her complete inability to see me as a person deserving of respect and dignity. But Jessica's inability to learn from the experience didn't diminish the positive changes in everyone's lives. Months after our confrontation, David brought me a letter he had written to Emma and Jake to be opened when they turned 21. In it, he admitted his mistakes, explained why his behavior had been wrong, and committed to being a better father and son for the rest of his life. He wanted them to learn from his experience and never make the same errors in judgment. "Mom, I want my children to grow up understanding that family members are supposed to protect and support each other, not exploit each other," he told me. "I want them to see what real love looks like, the kind of love you showed me, even after I betrayed you." The truth was, forgiving David had been easier than I expected. Not because what he did wasn't serious, but because his remorse was genuine and his commitment to change was real. He had made terrible choices under pressure, but he had owned those choices and was working to make amends.